Hello my friends and Chainsaw Man enjoyers! In celebration of the anime release, I'm very happy to present this cosplay prop build of our favorite cat-loving fool's giant mallet. Yes, that's right, Power's Blood Mallet! The epic weapon she creates while jumping off that tall building, barreling in and claiming all the glory. I knew when I saw this scene in the manga, I loved Power. I love how unhinged she is, how she charges into battle with reckless abandon. Her antics drew me in, and her adoration of cats sealed the deal on why I wanted to cosplay her. Power has the ability to turn her blood into any weapon, so I thought, of course I gotta make one to amp up this cosplay. And inevitably smack poor congoers on accident? I'm very sorry, Mr. House Husband. Or in some cases, get asked by masochists to intentionally hit them, like this person. So, which better weapon to do all those things than a big ol' red bloody mallet? This is my first time doing a large prop build and filming the process, so please forgive the small hiccups along the way, and without further ado, let's jump in! Here's a visual model that shows the main components of the mallet. The key to any great cosplay prop is its stability. It's gotta withstand the wear and tear of traveling, conventions, and smacking people who ask you politely. So the head of the mallet is made of a concrete forming tube wrapped in EVA foam. I also wanted the handle to be detachable, so to support this, I created a cylindrical core that houses a PVC T-fitting I could slide the handle in and out of. And of course, a list of the main materials and tools I used to create the mallet. Here we go, y'all. So I start by making the inner core by tracing the circumference of the forming tube onto insulation foam sheets and cutting them out with an X-Acto. I wanted these to be snug inside the tube, so the foam circles are roughly the same circumference. I cut a total of 4 circles for the core. I move on to cutting down the concrete forming tube for the mallet head. The tube came in a size of 48 inches long, so I decided to just half this for a mallet base of 24 inches. I marked the midpoint and wrapped the measuring tape around the tube, using it as a guide to draw a line of where I'd be cutting. I grabbed my handsaw and carefully cut the tube in half. Next, I start to work on the handle, comprised of a 45-inch dowel fitted into a 15.5-inch PVC pipe. I take the PVC and start heating one end with a heat gun. Big caution warning at this step: when you heat PVC, it can emit dangerous fumes that you really don't want to be breathing in, so please make sure to wear proper PPE and do this outside or in a well-ventilated space. The goal is to heat the pipe thoroughly and evenly until it becomes pliable. I do this by rotating the pipe and moving the heat gun across the surface, inside and out. Once it's pliable, I carefully fit the wooden dowel into the PVC until it cools down and locks into place. Going on back to the core, I take my foam circles and sandwich them together using Loctite adhesive. Now, I do want to show my mistake of using contact cement on insulation foam and probably killing some brain cells in the process. Contact cement is a solvent-based adhesive and eats through polystyrene, so make sure you read the labels of your materials and do your research. I did not. Anyways, this process was kind of fun. I felt like a silly little baker spreading frosting on my silly little 3-layer foam cake into the wee hours of the morning, losing my mind. Look at that close-up. Delicious. Next, I trace my PVC T-fitting onto the foam core and run an X-Acto along the tracing. This will help when I go to carve out the T-shape in the next step. And here is that next step. I used my Dremel fitted with a grinding stone to carve away the foam where the T-fitting will live. I made sure to carve away layer by layer, checking the depth along the way to make sure I wasn't removing too much of the foam. And here I am, doing one last fit check. Looks level. Great, moving on. I mark out a center line across the length of the forming tube and find the center point along the line to indicate where my handle will go. After tracing the handle on that point, I cut an initial hole with a spade drill bit. I refine this cut using a router attachment on my Dremel, being real careful not to cut away too much, or else I'll have a loose hole, which means I'd have a loose handle, and that would be a bad time. Check the handle fit, and we are good. It's time to insert the core. I spread a generous amount of Loctite along the inside of the tube. You'll notice I drew a center line on the inside and the outside of the tube that runs through the handle hole. I did this to the foam core as well to help line up where the handle would slide into the T-fitting. It's basically like a registration system to make sure everything lines the heck up. Once my core is placed correctly in the tube, I can begin the sealing process. I put a couple of foam pieces down on the tee in order to tighten up any extra space. Then I spread some more Loctite along the inside walls and on the foam and place my last foam circle in. And here's my cat Toya with nice words of encouragement. I check the handle fit and make sure everything is level. It's looking good, so I'm moving on. EVA foam time. I wrapped the entire base in foam and marked where my cuts would go. Lovely enough, my 12mm foam was 24 inches wide, the same measurement of my mallet base, so I would only need to cut the length. I checked the fit of the foam wrap, and I'm not too sure about it. There's too much excess where the ends meet, so I cut it again with this ridiculous technique of my leg all up on my desk. I don't recommend that, but you do what you gotta, and once it's good, I'll start gluing. I want the seam of the foam to go on the underside of the mallet head, so I lay down contact cement along the center line of the handle hole. Then I spread contact cement along the edge of my foam and wait a couple minutes until both surfaces become tacky. I press the glued surfaces together, adding even pressure. Please forgive me, I don't have footage of the entire gluing process, but I basically repeat this step until the entire foam wrap is secured. I really took it slow with gluing down small sections at a time and lining up the foam to the tube. I fill in any apparent gaps or unevenness by spreading quick seal along the seam. To further smooth it out, I add a bit of water, blending it into my foam surface. My emotional support manager has come to check on me again, reminding me to wear a mask if I'm going to use the Dremel on foam. Thank you for that reminder, you tiny angel. And here I am cutting away that foam using a Dremel with a router bit, carefully pinpointing where the handle hole is underneath. Let's check the functionality of the handle. And yeehaw, folks, we got a solid fit. Now that's really starting to look like a mallet. I cut 2 more insulation foam circles that will act as support caps on each end of the mallet. Gotta make sure Toya doesn't eat any of the foam. We don't want that. Here's us being silly. Then I spread Loctite on the inside edge of the tube and place the foam circle inside just enough that it's level with the edge of the tube. I do the same for the other end. I move on to making the actual end caps out of 12mm EVA foam. I use the mallet base as a reference to trace the circle onto the foam. Hello sir, can you please move? Thank you. Okay, this part's a little dumb. I don't think I'd recommend using the Dremel on your kitchen floor, but I knew it'd be my best bet to cut out smooth circles. But in order to do this as safely as possible, I set the router bit to be as far up into the Dremel shaft so the cut would be shallow. This allowed me to cut a nice guideline into the foam without cutting all the way through and risk messing up my floor. After making the initial cuts, I go in and finish the job with an X-Acto. Once I have both my end caps, I get to gluing. I spread contact cement along the edges of the mallet's EVA foam, and only the EVA foam. I cannot stress this enough. I spread Loctite on the insulation foam and place my end cap on, applying even pressure. I do this to both sides, and ta-da! We got a finished mallet base. I'm moving on to create battle damage on the mallet head. I used an X-Acto to make varying cuts that branch into one another. When you hit those thin cuts with a heat gun, the lines open up and give you a great cracking texture. For the larger chunks of battle damage, I use my Dremel with a couple of different engraving bits to carve into the foam at various angles. I did this especially along the edges using this glorious manga panel of power as reference. When I was satisfied with the amount of detailing on the mallet, I sealed the entire surface with my heat gun. Yes, the very important step of priming the mallet head, which I don't have footage of, go figure. But before applying any sort of paint to EVA foam, you gotta prime it. I used 2 cans worth of Plastidip to prime the foam, which gave me about 3 to 4 solid coats. It's now 6 a.m., the day of the con. I've been up for God knows how long, and my neighbors see me applying red spray paint to a giant mallet. And I'm like, hey, what's up, neighbor? How are you? How's your morning going? What'd you have for breakfast? I'm just over here painting, doing some light painting. And they look at me, look at my eyes, and they probably are thinking something's a little loose in my head. Because who would be doing this at 6 a.m.? Me. That is who. Me with something loose in my head. Moving on, I applied multiple coats of spray paint to the mallet using large sweeping motions. I made sure to get the top and bottom, and at some point I had to take the mallet out of the tripod to coat the handle. I used up 2 cans of matte red spray paint for the entire mallet. Now listen, our girl Power is the Blood Devil Fiend, and what's any Chainsaw Man character without a little bit of blood spatter? Not a damn Chainsaw Man character, I'll tell you that. So I mixed up some acrylic paint to create a deep red for oxidized blood and got to work. I just scooped some paint onto a spoon and whipped it at the mallet the same way Power flings veggies across the dinner table. And here it is, the final reveal. Creating Power's mallet was a fun challenge that really stretched my creativity to new areas I hadn't been before. It reminded me of how exciting it is to sink myself into a project, relishing in the details and inspiration from an artist that I look up to. Fujimoto is a real gem of a storyteller, and I was truly happy to bring one of his illustrations to life in this way. I hope you enjoyed this prop build video of Power's mallet. If you find it helpful while building your own, share your creations with me. I'd love to see how your prop comes out. Thanks so much for watching, and take care. Gotta get with my friends, make it last forever. It's like a music video.